Hi everyone, and welcome to video number 9 on Henry and his ministers. Now, in the previous video we were looking at Wolsey's foreign policy, and if you remember, he was successful. From roughly 1515 to about 1522 he did have some success. He was very pleased, chief minister. This video, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to look at the other side. From about 1522 through to 1529, unfortunately for Chief Minister Wolsey, he and his foreign policy could be seen to be a failure. So what happened in these years? What changed? Why had he gone from a happy Wolsey to a very sad Wolsey? Well, hopefully this video will show us exactly what went on. A key year, 1519. Charles of Spain is elected the Holy Roman Emperor. This decision changed the dynamics of Europe. It changed the way that Spain, France, England interacted with each other. The election of Charles to become Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor. Now, when that happened, the King of France, Francis I, was very unhappy because he had wanted to be chosen as Holy Roman Emperor. Also, now France, his own kingdom, was surrounded by potential enemies. There was Charles down in Spain and now Charles up in what is now Germany. So, if there's going to be trouble between those two big powers, Francis and Charles, France and the Holy Roman Empire, what is England going to do? Would there be trouble? Well, yes, there would be, because Charles, as Holy Roman Emperor, was very interested in claiming Milan, which is now in obviously what is now northern Italy. But Milan was controlled by Francis. So there is a point there of potential conflict. So in 1521, Charles and Francis go to war. Well, what's this got to do with England and Wolsey? Well, if you remember, in 1518, from the previous video, the Treaty of London had taken place. Wolsey's big success, his diplomatic success. Hooray, I've brought peace to Europe. Great glory, great prestige to King Henry VIII. But here we were, literally 2 or 3 years later, and Europe was at war. Therefore, it was a blow to the prestige of England, a blow to the prestige of Henry VIII, and also a blow to the prestige of Wolsey. So it showed that England was in effect powerless to stop the big two. Whatever they chose to do, they would do it. England was and also ran. Despite the Treaty of London, England was not yet at the top of the tree, not at the top table. So when Charles and Francis go to war, Henry VIII had a decision to make. What would he do? What would he be advised by Wolsey to do? Well, what's his options? Number 1, England could stay neutral, stay out of it. Well, the benefit of that is it'll be cheap, no financial cost. On the downside, though, England is looking just weak, irrelevant, not even involved in the decisions, as if they're sort of standing to one side. So England had another choice. Maybe they could choose to take a side. Would they decide to support France, or would they decide to support Charles and the Holy Roman Empire? What do you think he did? What did Henry VIII do? Well, he chose to support Charles, the Holy Roman Emperor. France was not a natural ally. Henry and England had lost land in France. Henry saw a chance here maybe to regain some of that land. So he chose Charles. He wanted to regain the land. And they hoped that by supporting Charles, a very powerful man now as Holy Roman Emperor, they hoped that Charles would be able to help make this happen, Henry get the land back. So in 1522, at the Treaty of Bruges, Henry declares war on France. Was that a good decision? Well, about 10,000 troops, 10,000 English troops are sent to France, led by the Duke of Suffolk, an invasion of France. War. Despite Wolsey's best efforts to stay out of war, events had taken charge and they had to react. So an English army is in France, and they got to within about 50 miles, 80 kilometres of Paris. But there was no support from Charles's army. Henry himself didn't travel. He remained in England. The Duke of Suffolk returned home. It had been a terribly expensive failure. Wolsey had spent the money and they seemed to have nothing for it. Then things got even worse for poor old Wolsey. 1525, the Battle of Pavia, which is in Italy. The French army was hammered by Charles and the Holy Roman Emperor. At first, Henry and Wolsey go, hooray, great news. Francis has been hammered. That gives us a chance to take the land in France. That's what they're thinking. Finally, it's a chance for us and our old friend Charles. Remember, we've made friends with Charles. We can divide France between the two of us. Me, Henry VIII, I'll probably become King of France, and I'll get back all the land that had been lost by England. That was what they thought would happen, 1525, after the Battle of Pavia. Great news. Not great news. Charles was not interested in any of this. Why not? Well, let's have a look at some possible reasons. Charles himself was more interested in controlling and getting powerful in Italy. Secondly, he had no wish, he had no desire to make Henry more powerful. He didn't want to increase the power of King Henry of England. So no, he wasn't going to help him. He felt, probably possibly rightly, that Henry had not really helped Charles himself very much in the battle against Francis. So just at the time when Wolsey and Henry are thinking, great news, we're going to re-establish ourselves as a big power, exactly the exact opposite happens, ladies and gentlemen. And Emperor Charles V released Francis. He'd been captured and he was now released. King Henry couldn't invade France now because there was no help from Charles. Also, there was no money. If you think back to video number 6, the opposition to the amicable grants. So it was a bad outcome for Henry VIII and Wolsey as chief minister. There had been a loss of prestige, especially to Charles V, who was now supremely in charge in Europe. Charles V hadn't valued Henry VIII as an ally. He'd lost his position as a big, important person in European affairs. Also, Henry had not regained any land in France, and he'd spent a huge amount of money, £430,000. So put all that together, and Wolsey's foreign policy was not doing very well. 1525, making the alliance with Charles V had not worked. Well, what could Wolsey do now? Well, unbelievably, he did a huge U-turn. And Wolsey, from 1525 through to 1529, instead of fighting France, Wolsey now says, well, I'll tell you what, let's make friends with France. So we get 1525, the Treaty of Moore. Henry gave up the claim. Says, look, I'll be King of England, but I give up my claim to be King of France. No, I will not say I should be King of France. In return, money. Francis I would pay an annual payment from France to England. Wolsey would be pleased about that because it's money. But again, Henry is losing his prestige, his glory, his honour as a potential King of France. More links or alliances between England and France. 1527, the League of Cognac, and later the Treaty of Westminster. An alliance against Charles. Great, you would say. He's changed sides. Wolsey has changed sides because Charles didn't give him what he wanted. But this new alliance, France and England against Charles, was defeated. England sent no troops, probably cost. It was cheap, but it was also damaging because it's creating the impression that England is not a reliable ally. Yes, they'll sign these treaties, these alliances, saying, oh, we'll help you, but they didn't actually help. They didn't do the fighting. 1529, the Battle of Landriano. Charles wins again. France is losing. England is doing nothing to help. So the U-turn and Wolsey making friends with France doesn't seem to be working either. 1529. There's a massive treaty called the Treaty of Cambrai. And what's this all about? Well, it's peace. It's a peace treaty. Emperor Charles V and King Francis I sign a peace treaty to stop fighting. Put the weapons down. Good news. The only problem was for England and Wolsey was this. These two superpowers signed the peace treaty, but they didn't even bother to tell England until the last minute. England was now seen as a second-ranked nation, below France, Spain, and the Holy Roman Empire. So if Wolsey's aims were to try and boost England, boost the prestige of King Henry, yes, from 1515 to 1522, that did happen. But from 1522 to 1529, the reverse happened. England was losing power, prestige, glory. Wolsey's foreign policy had failed. Now, as a result of what had gone on over in Europe, the growth in the power of Emperor Charles V, one side issue of that was that Emperor Charles V now controlled the Pope. Remember I said he wanted to get his power in Italy, where the Pope lived. So Charles V now controlled the Pope. Why have I mentioned that? Well, ladies and gentlemen, our old friend King Henry VIII, he's saying, Wolsey, you've been my chief minister. Some of the things you've done for me have been great. Recently, some of the things you've done for me haven't been so good. We've lost a bit of power and prestige in Europe. But I've got a very important job for you to do for me, Wolsey. This is the most important task. I want you, Wolsey, I'm giving you the order to sort out the problem of my marriage to Catherine of Aragon. It's a huge job, and it was a job for Wolsey. But I'm suggesting to you, ladies and gentlemen, because Charles V now had control of the Pope, that made Wolsey's task even more difficult. How could he sort out the problem of the marriage to Catherine of Aragon? Well, it's a big problem. It's coming in the next video. But just remember this, Charles V controls the Pope. That's going to be important for later. And you could argue that's why Wolsey's foreign policy, one of the reasons why in the end it failed. So there we have it. Wolsey's foreign policy. Success, hooray, followed by failure. Boo. As ever, I hope it's been useful. I'll see you soon with the next video. Catherine of Aragon. Take care. All the best now.